Hello, everybody, and welcome to podcast number 48 of the alexeisaylepodcast. Now, Khalid, you said we'd had a very nice message about our previous podcast with Dr. Edmund Griffiths.
That's correct, Alexi. On our Patreon, we get messages on there from lovely supporters of the show, patreon.com/alexeisaylepodcast if you want to help our endeavors. We got a message from Mikhail. Evening, Talal and Alexi. The last podcast was a great insight into how the left can do more than protest and fund left-leaning parties. It gave me a lot more hope as the Labour part has become right-wing, doesn't hold any true working class. Yes, we all agree with that. And I love Alexi's stance on the situation on Gaza too. What really interested me was how Alexi was discussing about how anarchism could integrate with a socialist government.
Oh.
Are there any podcasts we might do in the future to explore modern anarchism? Keep up the good work.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in, finding a kind of synthesis of all ideas on the left that work. And I will be talking more, getting you excited that I'm about to do a book deal with a major publisher to do a book about politics, and that should be coming out early next year.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I'll talk more about that in the future, but I am actively looking for kind of original ideas or original, collision, old ideas, but mixed together in a new way, like peanut butter and salt beef pies or something. I don't know. That's a terrible but,
delicious.
So yeah, I will. I'll be. I mean, this podcast has been a part of that process, really. So yes,
we're always exploring these ideas. We had one other message on the Patreon from Richard about our SodaStream discussion. I think on the Ellen E. Jones episode.
Yes.
Thank you for the magnificent podcast. It's been it's the best thing in his life over the last few years. You're still funny and relevant, apparently, Alexi.
Mm-hmm.
I look forward to meeting you on one of the peace marches.
I'm always there.
On the subject of BDS SodaStream, he's taken a leaf out of his daughter's book and has resorted to subversion. So he now covers his Puma hat with a Palestine badge, and on his JCB knapsack, and his SodaStream refills branded with boycott Israeli apartheid stickers, and he sends his canisters away to a guerrilla refill station somewhere in Hertfordshire.
Right, Hertfordshire.
Oh, quake ye, the Israeli marketing machine,
he says.
Yeah,
but how are we going to get? I mean, what we need? Maybe we should go into manufacturing.
We could make our own shit
to SodaStream machines, really, because you say you can get alternative source of gas cylinders. It's just the
and there are alternative machines, but they're either there's one that's quite shit, and the other ones are like really elite and expensive, and like for posh middle class people. And they're called like an essence machine or something like that. They're really
maybe we
fancy. So yeah, we could create a.
Yeah, we could create the people's.
Well, I think our one, the Alexia Podcast soda machine, would literally just be a massive canister in your kitchen, and like a hand pump. It'd like there'd be this massive contraption. Like
I don't really know how it. I don't honestly know how it works really, but yeah. If you could, like that guy a few years ago who, do you remember when everybody had clockwork radios? Too young for that? Trevor Smiley or something. And he invented this wind-up clockwork radio for Africa because he reckoned that, people in Africa couldn't afford batteries. So you wound it up.
Oh.
And it lasted half an hour, when radio was a thing. It's but it made such a noise when it unwound itself that you couldn't really
hear the radio.
Yeah. But there was a time when and I don't know if African people have them at all, but there was a time when every middle class home in London had a clockwork radio in it. I think he did torches as well, which makes slightly more sense.
Yeah.
But so this is the click one, click with Michel, click Hussein, don't delete, click, dead.
Well, the idea is good, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, our stuff would have kind of self-debilitating functionality when we create stuff for that. But I just like the idea of Richard's home, not to disparage you, Richard, but like he's just stuck boycott stickers on all of his Israeli products at home. It's like,
well, you shouldn't buy them in the first place,
because you do that in the supermarket.
I want to be censorious, really. We are where we are,
but this is old shit he's had for a long time. I'm sure he's not currently buying the stuff. And speaking of the anarchy and stuff, in this episode, we have the undertone of it being kind of you're wondering how our revolution will look and how we can avoid what was
exactly.
Authoritarianism.
We don't have to get into power, but we also have to ensure that once we're in power, that power doesn't become corrupted one way or another. So let's get on with it. This is with archaeologist turned comedian Khaled Winter. He usually does his podcast about comedians talking about events in history, but we're so fucking big that he had to come on our podcast to do his podcast.
Yeah.
Because we're so unbending.
I recommend his podcast. He's a friend of mine, Khaled Winter. His podcast is called Comedians Talking History. If you like what you hear on today's show, you will love his show as well. So go check that out. It's very funny that when you hear it right at the top, really, where just because I always like, whenever I talk about Manchester, I always go, he's got a shooter. To which he added, scatter. Which I just thought was brilliant. Scatter. He's got a shooter. Oh, he's a gem.
He seems like a lovely man. He's got a lovely voice. Anyway, without further ado, episode 48 of the alexeisaylepodcast with Khaled Winter and Kronstadt. What's up with that, yo? Okay, Khaled Winter, welcome to the longest running podcast with the name Alexis Sale in it. And you have, tell us your story really. How did you start out? What's your journey?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Very excited. So I'll go. I guess I'll start at the beginning. I'm from Manchester. You can probably tell by the accent.
He's got a shooter. Fuck off.
Scatter.
I like that.
From somewhere called Longsight in Manchester, which is it's a cool place. There's a lot of like cool people from there, but it's a bit shit.
I really don't know. I mean, I know the centre of Manchester, but I don't share the usual scouse you're supposed to dislike Manchester. I mean, it seems like an extraordinary city to me. But I'm the same. I'm full of history, but I don't share that disdain at all for it. But I feel like I don't. It's an enigma to me, Manchester, in many ways.
Yeah, I'm the same the other way with Liverpool. Like I love going to Liverpool and stuff. I think it's a bit daft that we're supposed to not like each other. Yeah, divide and conquer. That's
exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's by giving into these stereotype behaviours, we are fulfilling what the ruling class wants us to do, which is fight against each other.
Yeah. So
is it to do with football as well? Is that
no shop?
Yeah, but I think that comes after.
Yeah.
I think the football came after, like there was this. I think it's to do with. They say it's because of the Manchester Ship Canal.
Originally, yes.
But I think it's probably more than that, isn't it? Really,
it's just people fall into these tribal behaviours quite, and then it's a sort of easy kind of thing to do, isn't it? And I mean, obviously that. I think that Liverpool was, the most prosperous city in the world. And then once the ship canal was built, it could, I don't know, to a degree, meant that shipping could bypass Liverpool. But that really wasn't it. I mean, Liverpool remained immensely prosperous until really containerization. I think that's what really did for Liverpool. The fact that it wasn't, industrially diversified. But yeah, there's obviously, rival, the great polarities of football are Manchester City, Manchester United, and Liverpool FC, really. Everton, to a lesser degree.
People always want to start something with people near them anyway as well, don't they?
Yeah. It's a human instinct, but it's one that should be resisted anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, from there, yeah, it's a cool area, but yeah, it's not. It was stressful growing up. Put it that way. Leave it at that.
Well, what is the character of it?
I don't know if you remember, it was in the news and stuff quite a lot. In the late 90s, 2000s, there was a lot of like gang violence in Manchester, a lot of shootings.
Yeah, Manchester.
And it was mainly around Longside, Moss Side.
What is it? So is it like old-fashioned terraced housing, or is it council estates or what?
Council estates, yeah.
Right.
Terraced housing, some semi-detached, funnily enough. So, the old kind of Victorian... So it's funny because it's such a poor area, but some of the houses are like really nice.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of cool people.
Well, that happens, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of cool people came from that area. So like Emmeline Pankhurst, who was cool for a while until she wasn't, I guess.
Yeah. Mixed feelings about that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard of Sam Wilde. Who's amazing person. We did a podcast about him. He's from Longside. He was in the British Navy during colonialism, and he basically just left because he didn't like how racist they were.
Right.
So he just left the Navy, and then when the Spanish Civil War,
they don't look well. Left the Navy like in the middle of, without telling them, sort of.
Yeah, just got off.
They don't look kindly on that, do they?
No, they weren't big military. Yeah, it wasn't. They weren't big fans. No. But then when the Spanish Civil War started, he joined up and became like a commander of the international brigades. And then when it finished, he just went back to the building sites and started working again. I just found it fascinating.
Amazing story. Yeah.
So it's cool. It's got a good, cool history of like people like that. But yeah, it was very like stressful with a lot of violence and stuff like that.
How did you manage to transcend that then, to be to the point where you're on the Alexeisaylepodcast podcast?
I went to university, basically. That was the answer for me.
Simple, kids.
It was that simple for me personally, anyway. I went to UCL, so I moved to London. So got away from Manchester, and I loved it. I know a lot of people have a different experience to me when they go to a university from that background where they're like, everyone was like mean to me, but yeah, I loved it. Everyone was great with me. I think I got lucky. The archaeology department was just full of nice people, so it was great. Yeah. And then did archaeology 3 years, did my masters, and then became an archaeologist. Started doing comedy whilst I was an archaeologist, and basically just as many comedians do, got to the point where I had too much comedy to have a full-time job, basically. So had to stop doing it.
And now, what's your life like now?
It's honestly great. I know
I don't like to hear that.
It's very good.
I don't want people to be happy. What's who's it played Gandhi? Ben Kingsley in Sexy Beast. Jonathan Glazer, who we should also directed film. We should also give a big shout out to. He says, I want you to be happy. Why should you be happy? Why should you be happy? Yeah. Why should you be happy, Khaled?
Yeah, I shouldn't. It's just, it's luck, innit?
What's the money like in archaeology?
It's not good. It's terrible. Terrible.
Is there like a way to be a superstar? Is there a route? I suppose, because I did fine art, for instance. The only way you could really get rich in fine art is kind of selling your soul to the corporate, the collector, the oligarch.
Yeah.
Can you do that in archaeology?
You can be what they call a consultant for building firms.
Right.
Because, I mean, you don't get incredibly rich, but it's better paid than being a regular archaeologist. Because in the UK, if you want to build something, you kind of have a legal responsibility to not just destroy all the archaeology without recording it. So what a consultant will do is you'll look at the area that they're going to build.
Right.
And then you'll tell them what you think will be there, basically.
Yeah.
And that's well paid.
There must be people taking huge bribes as well to just say that there's nothing there. Do you think that happens?
I think not really in England, because it's too old. Like, everyone knows you couldn't hide it because it's so small, I guess, maybe. Like, other archaeologists would realize that there's something there. But I know that happens in other places where it's like, bigger and less attention on it. But like, if you're doing an excavation in the middle of London, you can't pretend there's nothing there, really. And I think those developers have so much money. It's a drop in the ocean for them anyway to hire an archaeologist for whatever they pay them. The other one,
I mean, they're held up, can't it? I mean, the development's held up. Yeah, that's
what they hate more. But to be honest, somewhere like in a city in particular, they know it's going to be the case. I think it's just part of the planning now, where they know it's going to be this long. And also what we'll do is we'll start excavating and then we'll clear a bit of the site, and then they can start work on that bit, and we'll still be so we'll be working there while they're working there. So it's not too much of a hold up. The other way you can make money is you become an academic, and you can get a decent salary there if you're kind of a high profile one, and you can write books and stuff, obviously, TV shows.
Are you haunted by, I mean, are there any archaeologists with a fedora hat and a bullwhip and,
Well, yeah, I mean, you're in the kind of history of archaeology, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm in the
archaeology zeitgeist.
Indiana 3. That's the. Of course, now, I mean, there's more and more. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Indiana Jones now goes from the hero to the villain in a sense, doesn't he? I mean, those indigenous people chasing him in the opening sequence of Indy 1 are in fact the heroes, aren't they? Really?
Yeah. It's what, if you're going to enjoy it, you've got to drop all your morals.
Yeah.
to do it. You got to just sit through those few hours without any kind of judgment.
Maybe you could do like a post, having Phoebe Waller-Bridge in the Dial of Destiny, I think killed the Indiana Jones franchise forever, didn't it? But apart from other problems, but
I mean, they didn't really go against the kind of British aristocracy turning up.
No, but maybe the only way to I could speak to Kathleen Kelly about Kennedy about this, or George Lucas, that the only possible way to do to revive the indie franchise might be to do a kind of, I can't remember, a kind of, it's not postmodernist, is it? It's a kind of revisionist Indiana Jones, where he comes at the end of his life to realize that he's been an agent of colonialism, really. And
he could take the stuff from the British Museum. And
yes,
take it back.
He could and take it back. Yes, he could break into. That's a good.
And like bury it.
Yeah, well,
just give it back. Just give it back.
The indigenous peoples. Yeah, that's an excellent idea. Indy's son. Undoes his father. That's an excellent idea.
There you go. Don't put this bit out till I'll. That's it.
Yeah. Get it out.
We don't want people stealing it.
When I did
Miss Indiana Jones.
When I did Indiana Jones, there was waiting for me in my hotel room was a big basket of exotic fruits.
Yeah. And
a note that said, "Welcome to the family, Steven." Bracket Spielberg and George Lucas. I mean, I haven't heard from them since, obviously, but I think that basket of fruit gives me the right to contact them at any point. And
you're family now.
Yeah, I am family. I'm literally family. Because it's obviously a legal document. A basket of.
If you visit Spielberg on the day of his daughter's wedding, he's obliged to.
Yeah,
do a favor for you.
Give you any role.
Yeah, because pomegranates and star fruit have a legal. It's a legal document.
I mean, I am very jealous of, as problematic as it is. I am very jealous that you were in Indiana Jones.
Well, it is
a thing. It was a thing. Not any fancy dress party. like when I was studying archaeology, if anyone turned up as Indiana Jones, they would get absolutely roasted. Like it was unacceptable. And for the girls, it was like Lara Croft was the equivalent. Like you're not allowed to do that. I believe they donated the whip to our department. Indiana Jones's whip, yeah, and they auctioned it off. Used I mean, they've got actual artifacts from ancient Egypt and stuff.
Yeah, why do they need some whip from Elstree Studio? Anyway, so what was your speciality in terms of archaeology, by the way?
So my master's dissertation was post-conflict the role of cultural heritage in post-conflict reconstruction.
Right.
Focused on Iraq and Uganda, which is quite niching down. But that's because I went to Iraq and Uganda to do archaeology.
And we, of course, coming up to bang up today in our current crisis, we see a very extended effort by the Israelis to destroy entirely the cultural heritage of Gaza. And it's a very deliberate policy that they have. So I guess that you would say that to reconstruct that culture will be vital in Gaza and in inshallah the post-war fucking.
Yeah, it's really important as well. People overlook it because obviously people's food and water and is primary, but it is something that's been used throughout history to get rid of people, basically, and for want of a better way of saying it. Even if you go back to Bosnia and destroying the mosques there, and then just turning around, as they're destroying them, turning around and saying there was never a mosque there.
Yes.
It happens.
We heard that recently,
a lot, but it can also be a positive thing once in reconciliation. So if you can actually
the Berlin Wall or something.
Well, if you accept each other's history and you give it kind of equal footing, that's quite a symbolic thing in terms of kind of building bridges. So Rwanda is quite a good example of that. After they did a fairly good job in the museums and stuff of kind of using the cultural heritage to kind of acknowledge each other, if that makes sense. And that's what I was kind of doing. I was in Kurdistan in Iraq. And basically what I was getting on is, what I was kind of asking them is how do you deal with the fact that Saddam is a big part of Iraqi history? Whether it's negative or he is a part of the history of Iraq. And it was really interesting to see how they dealt. I went to a fascinating place. It was one of his political prisons. It was basically a torture camp, and it was harrowing. And it's and they've turned it into a museum that you can visit. And I went there and I came out, I was shell shocked, honestly.
Indeed, yeah.
And it's I guess the point I was trying to get at with my dissertation was that's how they choose to deal, where they could have destroyed it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
They could have bulldozed it and said, we need to get rid of this legacy. Yeah. But they didn't. So that's what I was kind of getting at.
This is in a Kurdish area, presumably.
Yeah, it's in Sulaymaniyah in Kurdistan.
So, I mean, would you find the same cool, the same reasonable attitude just in a Sunni area of Iraq,
I don't know.
For instance?
I don't know because I couldn't go there. Couldn't get insurance to go to southern Iraq.
Right.
So I only went to the Kurdish areas.
Right.
ISIS famously destroyed loads of historic
and Al-Qaeda, of course.
Yeah, well, they destroy some, and then the rest. More often than destroying it, they sell it.
Oh,
to fund themselves. Right. Basically, it's a big problem. So you can buy antiquities in London that were looted by ISIS in antique shops and stuff.
Oh shit!
It's a big problem, the kind of illicit trade in antiquities, because it's just super easy to get provenance on something. But once something's been through an auction, it has provenance, which means that it's legit. But you just need one dodgy auctioneer to do that. Do you know what I mean? So it's a massive problem, actually.
Oh God!
More so than the destroying, even. The destroying, they often, it's just they pick one thing, and you know what I mean? It's like a symbolic thing because it's not Islamic. But the bigger problem is they're digging up to loot stuff and sell it. which happens in all, war zones if they've got valuable antiquities.
This is what Indiana 6 is. This is what
just
Indy
thinking
6.
the same thing. Beating up auctioneers, getting the artifacts back.
Yeah.
Yeah, auctioneers are the worst.
And then going to Syria, beating up ISIS and giving them to like the locals.
Fucking, we got this, man. I'm gonna get on the phone to my fam. Fan by fruit, and I'm gonna fucking pitch the fuck out of this. This is the only way back, boys. You wasted that 300 million on the dial of destiny, you dickheads.
The auctioneers is a great one because they're so easy to paint as the villain, aren't they? They've got loads of money. You take it from there.
Actually, Charles Dance is the head mysterious figure called the auctioneer.
Amazing. Yeah. I can see it now.
Yeah.
That's actually
Is it just
amazing.
going to be all old dudes fighting each other?
It's Indy's.
Just hitting each other with walking sticks.
No, it's Indy's grandson who realizes his father was a war criminal played by Harry Styles.
Okay, sick.
Or Aaron Taylor. She was right. Ellen East Jones, who we spoke to last time, wasn't she?
He's the new Bond.
He is the new Bond. And
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
I told him all he knew. I worked with him in 2004. Called The Thief Lord.
The Thief Lord, that's right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hashtag Alexei versus Bond is the hashtag I'm trying to get. Khaled, we want to get Alexei to be the next Bond villain. Wouldn't he be a good villain?
I can see it.
Are you on board with this, Alexei, by the way? Sorry, I'm talking.
Not particularly. It's a lot of 5 a.m. starts. I don't know if I can do that anymore.
They're gonna probably try and make you Russian, though, aren't they? Like in the next, I imagine. I
suppose. So, people think we had this conversation. People think I've been in 2 Bond films already because it was Robbie Coltrane. They say I loved you, and I said that's the other fat guy from the comics. And the better actor, if we're being honest.
But yeah, so that's what I did my masters and stuff on. But to be honest, as an archaeologist, I've just been a field archaeologist. So I'm one of the grunts who actually digs the stuff up,
right,
and finds it, which is the fun bit, I think.
Sure, I can't see why you'd want to do any of the other shit if you know. So then, tell us about your evolution then from archaeologist to comedian.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same as most comedians. Really, started doing it alongside the job, and then as you go, you get better and better. You get booked in more and more places.
Where did you sort of start? What kind of venues?
So I started in London, right. Which was very difficult. London, I don't know how, what you know about.
I found it easy, but yeah.
The old days. I wish I started where you started, the old easy days.
Yeah, you get away with any shit.
You could be crapping
with any old shit to shout.
You could be crapping MC the comedy stars.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I wasn't getting much, and then I went back to Manchester for a bit, and got lucky. Really started doing the Frog and Bucket, and the clubs around there.
That's the classic in Manchester, isn't it? That's where Peter Kay and all those people.
Yeah, I love the Frog and Bucket. It's got a bit of a reputation as being rowdy and tough, which it can be, but it's a great club. And then came back to London and started doing clubs in London as well, like Angel and stuff. I love Angel because I can just do whatever I want. I don't have to worry about.
Is that the one that's in the shopping mall sort of thing?
It's in. So their club's called the Bill Murray.
Oh, I know the Bill Murray.
Yeah. But yeah, I can be as left wing as I want and stuff, rather than the circuit gigs where you've got to kind of work around the people.
Well, shut up. He's become addicted to internet fame now. Just lying there. Well, shut up. He's just lying there.
Yes. Another Wilf cameo.
Worse. What kind of stuff do you do?
So I mean, I think if you listen to my set, you can tell that I'm very left wing, but I don't really talk about politics, if that makes sense. I never talk about party politics. Besides, a bit. I mean, I slag off the Tories a bit, but kind of in a way that they laugh at it as well. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like what I try and do. I don't know if you ever heard the analogy of like, you know, when you have to give a dog a pill and you put like dog food around it.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of what I'm doing with my socialist politics in comedy.
Beautiful metaphor.
So yeah, it's that kind of thing. Like if you're paying attention, you'll see my politics kind of shining through, and it's like social commentary. But I'm kind of doing it. I try and do it in a way where I'm kind of like, I don't really care, you know. I'm just making fun of people. So that's I think that, and I haven't deliberately done that. That's just how I've evolved as a comedian over time.
Yeah, I think you find your style, don't you? Really?
Yeah.
You find what works for you. Is there an ultimate goal really in terms of this crazy life of the comedian?
Honestly, I would be very, very happy just being able to be a touring comedian, doing my own shows. You know,
really
selling out nice. Medium-sized venues would be happy. I'd be very, very happy with that. Yeah, rather than the circuit.
Yeah,
I mean, I like the circuit. You know, that's what I wanted to do when I started. But I would like to just have my own audiences and gig to them.
Yeah. Well, yes, I guess that's...
You're not far off, man. You're very funny. Really funny, dude.
Thank you very much.
You do a lot of material about archaeology as well, or history?
I do, yeah. I do a bit. I'm considering actually just writing a show about history and archaeology, as well as having my other show.
Well, you know, that's what Steve Martin said to me. But he said, if you're a comic, you end up using everything that you could, everything. And I think he's right. I think it's a sort of obligation in the sense that if anything that you know, you should use as a comic. And I mean, he gave the example, I think, that he could, I can't even remember, he could roller skate and play the accordion. And then one night he found himself roller skating while playing the accordion on stage, you know, because there's two things that he could do. And I think that's what gives depth to a performance is when, anything that you can do, you should do it, I think. Well, I'd say that's almost a kind of rule of, I mean, some people, I guess, don't, but I think that's always been my inclination, really,
Do you find that you choose what you're going to write about? Because I tried to do that before and I can't. It's kind of what I think about ends up coming out. So the theme that runs through my set is class. I can't stop talking about it. I'll start writing a bit about, like, I've got a bit about pan au chocolats.
Right.
And it turns into a bit about class.
Yeah.
Like, I just can't get away from whatever's in my head. That's where it goes, if that makes sense.
I certainly in my sort of second iteration as a comedian. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that there's, I mean, both, my series Sandwich Bar, I mean, charts are very, there's stuff that's just about, nothing or about something else, but there's a kind of general theme, I think, that emerges, that the first sort of couple of series are about hope with the election of Corbyn. Then I was talking to head of comedy at BBC Studios the other day about this. The last series 4 Sandwich Bar was about despair, and it was about the anger and disappointment at the unseating of Corbyn. But when finally, although I'm sort of starting to change it, but when finally I do series 5 of Sandwich Bar, it'll be about despair. Be utterly about kind of emptiness and darkness and despair, really.
Yeah. So but I think
good stuff for comedy. So I mean, I think that sorry to cut across you, but I think sometimes you can just do a gag. A gag is a gag, but I think generally, I think themes appear, and I think that's a good thing, really.
I think Corbyn being, ousted and the Labour Party becoming what it is has made me a lot funnier.
It has something good came out of it.
It has, because I don't care anymore. And there is something funny about somebody who is like, clearly cares but doesn't care anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's something funny about. I think it's actually maybe because I was too invested. I was almost too invested from a comedy point of view.
So you find yourself sort of censoring yourself, or
yeah, I'm just like, like he's. I mean, it's a bit cliche in it, but like I don't like him. I don't like it. Like they're all, I'm kind of just. There's something funny about someone who genuinely just doesn't care about the thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's one good thing has come from it, like you say.
Yeah, well, I think comics should never really believe in anything. I mean, I think kind of nihilism is a good starting point, really. So to come on to, so you have this podcast, or is it you already do it, or it's
yes, it's new. It started a couple of months ago,
right?
So it's Comedians Talking History, very creatively named. Because
there's a program on which actually just went out on Saturdays before the repeats of my show, Strangers on Training Radio 4, called You're Dead to Me, which was a similar kind of.
Oh, is that the BBC?
Radio 4 thing, which was kind of sort of just irritating. Well, I aired one that was about something that I knew something about, which was Chinese martial arts, and they had it just kind of annoyed me really because it was flippant, I thought, really.
I don't know about that podcast in particular, but I find a lot of the history stuff, it's like, let's talk about the quirky thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'd rather talk about the thing that changed the world in that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also the other thing is this, I mean, you know this way better than me, but if you're doing something for the BBC, there's obviously a restriction on what you can actually
be like, I guess, to a level. In all fairness, they're marvelously permissive with me, but I mean, I think I'm an exception. I think, but it's more that people often second guess, I think, and to kind of decide to be,
they censor themselves.
Yeah, so people actually do it themselves.
And kind of locate themselves in a kind of, again, I have a very, it's easy for me to talk because I also have obviously a very easy route to getting commissioned by Radio 4. So it's, I can kind of bypass the usual hoops that you have to go through. But so,
I guess they know what you are as well.
Yeah. And I think, Linda thinks that they just have me on because they can say, look, we can't be agents of global imperialism. We've got him on.
We've got Max's
let
friend.
him do 2 hours every comedy every
token anarchist.
2 years. Yeah, well, I'll take that. But I mean, it's I don't know how true that is. I mean, but I mean, they've been basically with me. I was putting this encomium that Radio 4 being marvelously supportive with me. So, but I think we kind of got off track there. I was just off all the Radio 4 program.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think it's specific to the BBC. I think it's a thing that's just how it's talked about generally in media. It's like you say, people are very flippant and kind of they're looking for the quirky thing about it rather than actually being interested in it.
History interesting, which it is.
Yeah. Or I find that they do a lot of talking down to you. It's always like, someone who went to an Oxbridge University and they're talking down at us as if we're, children in the primary school.
And there's a certain historian type, not a certain historian, like I'm calling out one person, a certain type of historian who they can't help but just relate everything back to Britain.
Right.
Like everything has to be, I think a lot of the time they don't realize they're doing it. But like everything has to relate to Britain in some way, even like metaphorically. Right. It doesn't have to be. And it kind of skews their whole perception of everything, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I did that whole bit in one series about, Dominic Sandbrook, I particularly hate, who I think is always subtly wrong. And then Lucy Worsley, every BBC 4 has to feature every Lucy Worsley in a stupid bonnet, and that was that shitbag who used to be head of the British Museum. I've forgotten his name. Anyway, sorry, took a dark turn there. So, who have you had on? What have you covered so far?
We've had quite a few. I think we've got 14 episodes out now. So we do.
All right. Okay. What's it called?
Comedians Talking History.
Okay.
And I've had quite a mix actually. So I've had comedians who are kind of rough and ready, if you like. So I don't know if you know,
right.
like Jamie Hutchinson, who's like kind of known for being a drunkard. He won't mind me saying that. That is what he's known for. I had Matt Richardson. I don't know if you know Matt. He was fantastic. We did an episode on Cleopatra with Matt. Did a really one of my favorite guests isn't a comedian. He's called Nuruddin Chowdhury. He's a journalist, and we did Sam Wilde, who I was talking about before, and that was absolutely fascinating because the thing I really liked about that is we really got into the weeds about the perception of the idea of white working class.
Yes.
And this perception that people who aren't working class have, that working class people are just kind of almost inherently racist.
Yeah.
And almost like if they're not racist, it's because they fought against it. They've had to struggle internally to not be racist because they're inherently racist.
Yeah.
And
that's very interesting. Yeah.
And talking about this person who was, from the early 1900s, who quite clearly saw racism when he was in the Navy and just said, no, not for me.
Yeah.
And it kind of broke a lot of those myths about, and also he was a, stereotypically masculine person as well, which because there's a perception.
I mean, it's so sort of classist, isn't it, to make those assumptions about the working class, that there are always very strong strains of anti-imperialism, anti-racism, etc. in the working class. I mean, it's funny. The cotton workers during the American Civil War refused to work on southern cotton, even though it meant that in Lancashire, even though it meant that they, would face starvation for their refusal, really, for example, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas actually the people of Liverpool were actually pro-Confederacy because the shipping links with the South.
Yeah, and like when my dad came to this country, he was drinking with working class people. He wasn't hanging out with, there was very few immigrants where he was from hanging out with middle class people.
Yeah.
So like this idea that they are inherently, and listen, there's obviously lots of racist people who are working class, but I hate this idea that it's some kind of like inbuilt thing.
Inherent,
yeah.
It's clear not. So that was my favorite episode because I think it's something that I've fought for a long time and never really, put into words. And we kind of got there by accident by just talking about this person from history.
You've got a broad range as well. It's not just individuals that you've done episodes on. You did an episode on Terracotta Army. Hadrian's Wall was one episode.
Yeah, Hadrian's Wall. Lots of we've got one coming out on the Russian Revolution,
which brings us very neatly.
There you go.
But a little bit too soon, really. To what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about. You're going to do your podcast on my podcast, as it were.
Very excited.
Like a crossover, is this when?
Yeah, they call it cross-pollination.
Cross-pollination. Okay. It's like when the Avengers appear in fucking Marvel bollocks.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, when like the Fantastic Four show up at the Avengers headquarters.
Yeah.
And no, it's more like when Batman shows up on a Iron Man comic strip.
It's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, this is like the Avengers film. Because you have like Iron Man film, and you have like Captain America film, and then they all come together for the Avengers film.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. All right. Okay.
I just thought it's Khaled's a friend of mine. I thought it'd be a cool way to. I'm a massive fan of his show, and I really, really recommend Comedians Talking History. It's really funny. It's really smart and educational. I've really enjoyed listening to it, and we were gonna get you to show up on his podcast. And what's the format? So it's the guest who picks the topic, right?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing to say is like I don't position myself as an expert. Like I'm very obvious. Like I'm an archaeologist. I'm good at research and history, obviously.
Right.
And, I have a professional background in history. But I guess the thing people like about it is that it's so casual that we kind of talk about the thing, and I have stuff that we're going to hit, but it's not it's not stale. It's not an expert just giving you a list of what happened kind of thing. So I very much encourage the guests to jump in as much as they want. So yeah, the guest picks something they're interested in from history. I research it. So sometimes it might be something that I know loads about already that I've worked on or whatever, or it might be something that I don't know much about. I do research and then we basically talk about it. I kind of go, I've structured it and the guest can relax and just kind of jump in as they want. And I've actually had a mix of guests as well. Some guests know nothing about this topic. Yeah. And then I've had other guests. I had my comedian, John Maher, who's from Northern Ireland. And we were talking about Grace O'Malley, the Irish pirate queen. And he actually knew loads about it because it's kind of a local legend. And she's a real person. She's not a legend. So yeah, it's a real mix. And I kind of, on the podcast, I try and let the personality of the comedian come through as well, rather than bend them to my will, if you like.
That's good. I hate research. I just make shit up really. A lot of stuff in my fiction is actually, which appears to be authoritative true, is actually just made up nonsense that I just think, fuck it, it's really
you say that, but you obviously have a very good knowledge of the things you're interested in.
Yeah, I do. It's sometimes, but sometimes patchy, and I know nothing. For instance, I don't know whether this is revulsion at Stephen Fry. I can't keep in my head Greek mythology, for instance. I do think that Greek mythology is, these are the foundation myths of kind of our civilization in a way, and I would love to be able to remember about Persephone, or I don't even know if that is Greek, but Pericles, and it just won't stay. Whereas the gearbox arrangements on the KV-1 tank that sticks.
Sticks for you,
and that doesn't, it doesn't. But that doesn't impress at cocktail parties, really.
Yeah, but I love doing research about history because I love history. Yeah. But if you ask me to do research about something that I'm not bothered about, I would hate it. And I've actually had people on the podcast who have come on and at the start have said, I don't like history.
Right.
And what they mean is they didn't like history in school or whatever.
School, yeah.
Because not liking history is that means you don't like anything that's ever happened. Or like you're not like you're not interested in anything that's ever happened before. Yeah, you're only interested in the future. And thankfully I managed to get them engaged, so they enjoyed it.
Well, I think he stole it from something else, isn't it? But in Alan Bennett's The History Boys, which is actually not a great play in many ways, but he's just, somebody says history is just one fucking thing after another.
That is really good
line. I think Alan Bennett.
That is great.
Maybe if it's not well known, I'll steal it. But I think Alan Bennett got it off somebody else, but it's one fucking thing after another. So anyway, to move on, you mentioned Russian Revolution. One of my interests is how is it as a as a source, a revolutionary, as a Marxist, is how revolutions. That inevitable process up to now, where revolutions or protests or even anti-colonial movements, which are revolutions in a sense, how they fall apart very quickly. How there's been that inevitable line where they fall very quickly into autocracy, and I suppose that started with the French Revolution and the subsequent terror, and then the kind of Napoleon, the kind of kissed armor of his day, perhaps, and then but they're both very short anyway.
I saw someone saying I can't remember. I wish I could give them credit for it, but someone said the debates for the next election are just going to be two men trying to convince everyone that they're 5'8".
Two tiny little men. I know I don't know how much of it you can do that these days, but I mean,
yeah. Sorry, you were saying about why you're interested in.
So what I chose to when Talal said choose the topic, Yeah, so all revolutions and all liberation movements seem to collapse into autocracy. And so I chose the Kronstadt Rebellion of 1920 when, I guess it's more complicated than that, but it's in essence the garrison, the Navy base of Kronstadt and the base of the Soviet Baltic Fleet rose up and demanded a return to the original values of the revolution, which they thought, even 3 years later, had been abandoned, that free speech had gone. Bolsheviks were getting better rations than the population. The secret police, workers' assemblies, Soviets, the idea that workers control their own workspaces have been changed to, centralized control from the party in Moscow, political commissars, savage repression, and they demanded an end to all that and a return to the founding kind of the founding beliefs of the revolution. Of course, they were ruthlessly suppressed. So, so I suppose through examining how that happened, I swear that this time we're going to get it right. That this time that we're going to have a revolution. I'm planning a revolution. It's later this year, bring snacks. And, but this time I swear that we're not going to collapse into autocracy. This time it's going to be all right. So,
but yeah, it's fascinating. It's what I found fascinating. So I've heard Kronstadt before. I researched it. And I don't know if you come across this. It's used by a lot of like right-wing people as a kind of, as a like shorthand for basically I think it's like the moment you realize communism doesn't work or whatever it is.
Moment, which
is ironic because their problem is that it's not ideological enough. Like they it's kind of the opposite of what they should be talking about, the White Army or whatever it is, if they want to, use an example of like anti-communism at the time. Yeah. And it's the other thing I found interesting about it compared to like the public perception. I think there is a general perception from people who haven't really done a lot of reading or whatever that Stalin he just did everything bad. He's the one who made everything bad. It was great, and then Stalin came along, and it wasn't great anymore.
His carefully coiffured facial hair,
and I think this is a good example of, first of all, that's not true.
No. Well, definitely the rot started with Lenin, right? I mean, we can talk about why, but Lenin.
It's also a good example of why you shouldn't have idols, or you shouldn't put people on a pedestal and say this, and kind of paint them as perfect, because nobody is. Yeah, because I think Trotsky is that for a lot of people. And listen, I'm not a political I'm out of my depth if I start talking to people who are really, understand Marxism deeply. But I do think Trotsky is that for a lot of people. And I think this really kind of shows his ass, for want of a better term.
That's the saying, long sight.
Yeah. It's like when someone comes out and you're like, you think they're really nice, you think they're really pleasant, and then there's something happens and they lose it. You're like, oh, he showed his ass there. Yeah. And I think this does that a bit for Trotsky, which doesn't, denigrate. I'm sure the people who kind of hold him up, like, I'm sure the good stuff about him is still true.
Yeah, what he said, but that is, I mean, again, that is a fatal flaw of the left, is hero worship. I think that is just something that we really have to address.
And you set yourself up for failure, because then all that the other side requires is to find a flaw.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a single flaw and you're done. Yeah, it's it's ridiculous.
So stupid. It's so stupid, And we have to wean ourselves off that, I think. Yeah. So anyway, that
was the overall historical context that hit me the most when I was looking at it. So it's the Kronstadt Rebellion. Well, I'll say what it is first of all, and like the context of it. So it's following World War I and the Russian Revolution, which are obviously interlinked. World War I and the Russian Revolution. we won't go through all the Russian Revolution. Obviously, that's a long story in itself. But just to say that the sailors at Kronstadt is off the coast of in the Bay of Finland, off the coast of St. Petersburg, or Petrograd as it was, and it basically protects Petrograd. So to get to Petrograd, you have to go past Kronstadt. It's like an island, heavily fortified island, and the sailors there. I think Trotsky described them as, I haven't got the exact phrase, but it's like the jewel in the crown of the revolution. Something. It was like that kind of admiration for them.
Because it was where I think Battleship Potemkin was based in the 1905 revolution.
Yeah, so they are, and that's a really interesting aspect of this as well, is that they're too, what's the word? They're almost too, they're too much a symbol of the revolution for them to be truly painted as like counter-revolutionaries.
Right.
It's almost preposterous to paint them as counter-revolutionaries because Trotsky, in his own words, has said that they are, almost like the shining light of the revolution. So, I mean, that doesn't mean they don't try it, but it's a ridiculous notion that they are, agents of the White Army or whatever it is, or international forces. So following the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks have seized power, obviously, and they're at war with the White Army. The sailors, they are. This is the thing that I think might get mixed up a bit. They're not trying to get rid of the Bolsheviks. They want reform. That's their platform. And you kind of mentioned it there. They want an actual Soviet Union. They want the Soviets, which are the local councils, to have power rather than this centralized Bolshevik power. And the reason it kind of comes to a head, so I'm sure you're familiar with war communism, which is during the Civil War, they have this war communism. And it's obviously, again, it's a complex thing, but the big problem is the requisition of grain. So I think it's primarily Trotsky who thinks that they need to feed the soldiers, first of all, because they're fighting a war, and also the urban kind of working class, because they're the factories that are making the guns and the bullets and stuff. And that means that they're taking grain from the peasants in the countryside, and they're obviously struggling heavily. They're imposing very harsh rations, and it gets even more exasperated because they prevent them from trading. So the peasants in the countryside, they want to leave wherever they are. And in the city, in fact, because it gets to a point where the cities are also having their rations cut because they have a very harsh winter. But people want to trade so that they can get food. And the Bolsheviks call them speculators and say, you're not allowed to trade. Now, I don't know how much of this is ideological and how much of it do they see a practical problem with people being allowed to travel around and trade. So it depends who you listen to. Certain people will tell you this is purely ideological. It's a communist thing that they don't want anyone to trade. There is also an idea of like, if people are moving around trading, there can be, logistical problems with maintaining the system that they've got in place. The long and short of it is that things are bad. That's the quick summary of it.
I think it's something we've talked about on this podcast before, is that it's a sort of, when there's a revolution or when there's a anti-colonial struggle, it's a kind of win-win for the powers of repression, the powers of capitalists, because if you intervene, then either the revolutionaries are forced to, well, they see no other way but to tighten discipline, to become authoritarian, because that is, they think the way that you win a war is to double down on their kind of ideological rigidity, really, and I think that what you're saying speaks to that they have to reinforce the kind of the anti-petty bourgeois nature of Marxist thinking. So they win. I mean, the forces of oppression win because either the revolution collapses into authoritarianism and it's done for anyway, or if they don't bring these measures in, then it's defeated militarily, I think, and that's a process that we see. And again, that's another thing that I think the left hasn't really found a way around and needs to,
That's it. That's a great point, and that's a point that often gets overlooked. Because people say, "Oh, they brought in authoritarianism that quick," almost as if they just did it for the sake of it. Like their plan from the beginning was to be authoritarian, and I don't think it's that simple. I think it is the war. It's the Civil War.
Yes.
But
remember that. British troops didn't leave the territory of the Soviet Union until 1920, 1921, something like that. That was because of my interest that the foundations of the Russian armored corps are British and French tanks that are left behind or taken from them.
Yeah, and that really kind of contextualizes this, because the Kronstadt rebellion is 21. So officially the Civil War is still going, but really it's over. They're in retreat, and this is the problem. The war communism is still in place.
Yes.
And that's their problem. So they almost put up with it during the Civil War. And that also begs the question: it's a kind of thing, because you don't know, you can't read the mind of Lenin and Trotsky. Was it a case that they didn't want to do that, and then by time they've kind of, they're doing it for the war finishes, and instead of actually getting rid of it, they said, no, we have to keep this now. Do you know what I mean? Like, you've almost got there by accident, but once you're there, you're there.
I think you probably do if you've kind of got autocratic tendencies anyway, but then you probably do. Again, who knows what their original intentions were, but you sort of think, oh, well, this, just having the ruthless secret police and the authoritarian, it makes shit easier to get done, doesn't it, really? You don't have to worry about convincing all these competing voices. You just order stuff to happen and it happens, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very seductive, I think, to be an authoritarian.
It's hard to give up power, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once you've got it, to then say, we needed it for that, but now we're going to give it up. That's very, very rarely happens. There's very few cases in history of people giving up power when they don't have to. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of any. I'm sure there are, but I can't think of any off the top of my head where people have had this kind of sweeping power and said, you know what, it's not right.
I'm gonna hand this golden crown back. Yeah. Well, I suppose you could argue that the only, is Western democracies. Maybe they eventually that in Britain and the United States, that eventually those war conditions did. That would be an argument for the kind of superiority of liberal democracy, that they did to a degree disband themselves. So certainly the military industrial complex in the United States never disbanded itself. So, but you could use that as advance. I don't necessarily buy it, but you could advance that as an argument for the superiority of liberal Western democracy.
Yeah, and there were. It should be said as well. In Russia, there were constitutional people who supported a constitutional monarchy as well. This is, I think people don't realize how diverse politics were in Russia.
I think reading up myself, that's one of the things that struck me, that I'd kind of either not known or forgotten. Yeah, exactly. The many different strains in Russia, and of course, you see it as a monopolar kind of society now under Putin, and think. But we'll go talk a bit more about that.
Yeah. So we'll get into the sailors. We're kind of that's the scene. It's rough. Rations are being cut. They're restricting people from trading. Times are hard. The winter makes it much worse, obviously, in Russia, of course, because transport becomes difficult. They can't move. Even the food they have, they can't move around properly. So Kronstadt itself, it has 50,000 civilians and 26,000 sailors at the time. So it's quite a lot of people there. And the population and the sailors prefer this idea of local rule rather than this centralized government. It's very much, it's quite clear. It's quite clear that's what they want. The fleet itself is becoming more kind of, like disillusioned, I guess, with the Bolsheviks. And there's really, I think the thing that tips it is they go home for leave. So whilst they're in Kronstadt, there's the information they get is pretty controlled. You know, they're not really hearing what it's like in the rest of Russia. They go home for leave. A lot of them are Ukrainian and from very poor areas. And I think they almost feel ashamed because we have a quote from one of the sailors who said I think it was his mother said to him, like, why are you fighting for the oppressors? Talking about the Bolsheviks. And they obviously see themselves as part of this like glorious, you know, revolution, not the glorious revolution, it's just the English one, but like a glorious revolution. And I'm kind of speculating a bit, but I imagine there was a lot of shame, you know, when you think that's what you are, and then you go back and your family are like, why are you oppressing us?
Yeah. What?
Yeah. And obviously on top of that, they also see how much people are struggling.
Yeah. And again, I think that is, it's not quite what you're talking about, but that is another fatal flaw in revolutionary movements and anti-colonial movements is that inclination to reward, you know, to have better rations for your people, which I think is a terrible, terrible.
Yeah, and that's absolutely happening. Really. Bolshevik party members are getting better rations than other people. So a delegation,
in a sense, they should be getting worse rations. I mean, you know, if you want to make one of these kind of revolutions work, you have to make greater sacrifices if you want to be a revolutionary exemplar.
Yeah. If you're going to lead, you have to make the biggest. I think it's like in armies, like officers have to have better times and stuff than the soldiers.
Have to have better what?
You know, like when they time the runs and stuff like that. Like the officers, they expect the officers to have better times than the soldiers.
Right.
So that they're never. Because the idea is you shouldn't be asking people to do something that you can't or won't do. I think it's similar, is it, with the rations? Like you say, like they should be having less almost to say, well, you know, we're kind of struggling more than you.
Yeah, and
even.
it seems to be an inevitable process that you start rewarding yourself very rapidly, really, with these, like, you know, I mean, and that in the end ultimately leads to the corruption. But I mean, the Palestinian struggle, for instance, the PLO itself was, even before, you know, in the 60s, was tremendously, Arafat himself was, I think, tremendously corrupt. And obviously the Palestinian, I don't know about Hamas, but the Palestinian Authority is profoundly corrupt, you know.
And also, like, a lot of the armed forces will tend to be working class people, so when they go home, they're naturally going to see the effects of
that's huge in the Russian Revolution. So Russia, going back here, but it's relevant. So Russia they had a war with Japan, which was disastrous. They got absolutely battered. I think they thought, because of, you know, Orientalism and thinking that they're superior, they thought they could just go to Asia and smash everybody, and Japan battered them. So they lost a lot of officers there. Then they joined World War One, and they got absolutely hammered in World War One as well. So they basically lost their officer class, and they had to promote working class recruits to officers. And that was a problem for them because the officers weren't ideologically tied into the Tsars. So when it started with the Russian Revolution really begins, I guess, with the Women's March on International Women's Day. And they asked them to shoot the women on the march. And the officers just said, no, obviously we're not going to do that. And the ones who wanted to, they just shot them. And it was this idea of like having this,
wow.
Like your officers need to be the most they need to be ideologically bought in.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like I imagine in like China, for example, the officers in the army like really, really love Mao. And like in England, like you have to be a proper like monarchist, you know, to be an officer, and like doing this for Queen, like you really buy in. Whereas a regular soldier, you can just do it for a job, you know.
It's an interesting distinction. I don't know whether it's completely true. I mean, somebody can probably argue about this when this goes out, but my impression is, because I've been thinking about that, certainly during the Long March and during the 1930s, the Chinese communists had a much more cooperative relationship with the peasantry, that they paid. They didn't requisition. They paid for everything that they had, and they saw the peasantry as being not an enemy, but as a vital ally, really. Whereas obviously the Bolsheviks, saw the industrial proletariats as being their people and the peasantry as being a kind of an enemy, really, and acted accordingly. I don't know how true that is, but
yeah. Well, I mean, there was there were revolts, lots of peasants' revolts. So I think they saw them as an enemy, just in practical terms as well. I think it was like it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, wasn't it? A bit as well. I think with Russia as well. I don't know if I hesitate to say this a bit because I feel like someone's going to blast me for it, but I feel like there's a tendency to attribute practical things to ideological things, if that makes sense. Basically, everything is when I read a lot of what people have written about Russia in this period, you could easily think almost every decision is done from an ideological basis,
right?
And I just don't think that's the case.
That's interesting.
And we kind of, we kind of touched on it with the authoritarianism. Like it's a practical thing, probably more a practical thing. In that, even if it's not the right thing in their minds, the workers need, we need to industrialize, we need to fight the Civil War, we need guns and tanks and, aircraft and whatever. These are the priorities. The workers need to be fed. The peasants have the food. We need to take it off the peasants and give it to the workers. And I wonder if the conflict between the Bolsheviks and the peasants is a practical thing because they're basically taking stuff from them. The revolts, they're kind of they see it as both
practical. I mean, it is ideological as well in strictly Marxist terms that the proletariat is seen as the advanced form of the peasantry is seen as as kind of more, as ambiguous, aren't they, in the class struggle because they're not involved, they're not employed, they work for themselves in a sense, even though their produce is taken from them, or they give a large part of their produce previously to the feudal lord. So they don't share the same class consciousness as the working class, and therefore they're seen as the enemy, which is, and that is ideological and is kind of foolish in a sense, I think.
Yeah, because when I say there were peasant uprisings, there were a lot of peasant uprisings. So
quite reasonably.
Leading up to this, in January 1921, they reduced bread rations by a third. And in February 1921, the Cheka reported 155 peasant uprisings.
We should say that the Cheka is the precursor of the KGB. It's the secret police. Yeah.
The secret police, which is another kind of example of how bad it's getting. Basically, when you got that many uprisings or in a single month, like that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen by accident.
Shit's going well. No.
So we were saying about how the sailors have had this epiphany is a bit strong. They knew stuff wasn't great already, but they've had this kind of moment where they've gone home and they've seen what's happening. This one called Stepan Petroshenko, who you've probably heard of. Mm-hmm. So he's the chief clerk on one of the warships, and he, along with the others, they draft a set of 15 demands. Which was presented to the Soviet on February 28th. And the demands, I won't go through all 15 because some of them are quite specific, they're not they get into details and stuff. But the main things are free speech and free press, free assembly for trade unions, which seems quite reasonable, equal rations for everyone, freeing of socialist political prisoners, because obviously the Bolsheviks are cracking down on, other left-wing groups.
Schools of thought,
the end of war communism and more generally the end of the Bolshevik monopoly, basically. So their slogan becomes all power to the Soviets, not to the party.
Right.
Which sums it up pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
I should say at this point, and again, this is where I might be a little bit out of my depth when it comes to actual Marxist theory and stuff. But I think the argument on the other side from Lenin is he thinks having a centralized industrial state or not having a centralized industrial state, would fragment Russia into these small communes and basically leave them vulnerable to right-wing regimes from outside and inside. So I just thought I should mention that they do have a reason why they think you shouldn't have that, even though most people think you should have it as kind of regional Soviet.
Well, in an ideal world, it would be. Well, this again makes it a win-win for the kind of forces of oppression, doesn't it? Because either. Yes, that describes a kind of paradisical society in a sense, separate communes, self-sufficient or whatever, local democracy and stuff. But perhaps in that period certainly would have made them vulnerable to outside forces.
Yeah. I'm curious, what is an example of one of the more specific demands? What is it like? We want, wear your own clothes Friday.
No, it's like administrative stuff rather than demands. Is like we want. It's like like kind of to do with specific like administration and things like
right.
that.
So
yeah,
nothing.
Not very excited. No. Nothing too excited.
We want Tortilla Tuesdays.
Yeah, I mean that would be good,
wouldn't it? I want a cool red stripe on our ship. All right.
Although not having beer was a big thing. Not being allowed to drink was quite a big deal with the
Russia.
Soldiers weren't happy about that. Yeah. So the Kronstadt Soviet, which is run by the Bolsheviks, they call a public meeting on the 1st of March because they see there's a problem here. So this public meeting, it's attended by over 15,000 people. And the Bolsheviks offer to hear the demands. Retrospectively, they're not really interested in their demands. I think that becomes clear. But their representative is heckled off the island, and March the 1st is considered the date that officially begins the mutiny, if you like. The assembly, they adopt the resolutions unanimously. The Kronstadt group that they put an assembly together, they adopt the resolutions unanimously, and now you've basically got your two sides. You've got the Bolsheviks and you've got the Kronstadt sailors. Again, I've said it already, but their idea here is not to go into armed conflict. Like they're almost certain that it's going to just be negotiations. The Bolsheviks are going to make concessions and everyone's going to be happy. Maybe that's a bit too simple, a bit too nice, but that's right in their head. They're not thinking we're going to war with the Bolsheviks here. So that's the thing to remember. They capture various Bolsheviks. From all the sources I can find, they treated them well. They gave them equal rations. They weren't, beating them up and torturing them and stuff like that. Again, from the sources I can find, is always a caveat you have to put in with these things. Their flag was very cool. They had a flag based on the Jolly Roger pirate flag from the 18th century.
No way.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So it had the pirate skull on it, and then across it had the words "Death to the bourgeoisie" written across the flag.
All the bases,
great flag. And the response of the Bolsheviks is to isolate the island, create a press blackout so nobody really knows what's happening. And they brand them puppets of the White Army, which, if people don't know, the White Army is like the kind of remnants of the Tsarist loyalists from the army, along with international support who are fighting against the Red Army. And so the Bolsheviks say they're puppets of the White Army, but it's actually a ridiculous accusation. As we've said before, these people are the pride of the revolution. Like you don't really get more ideologically pure in a sense than they are. And they actually were offered aid from foreign powers and they turned it down because they knew that if they took it, that would be used against them to say, as evidence. There is a bit of circumstantial evidence, which is weird. So 2 weeks before, there was an article in a French newspaper saying that there was going to be a rebellion at Kronstadt, which is weird. I don't, and Lenin obviously uses that as a example that, basically saying that the French have kind of fluffed it. And they've reported it too early. And it was actually controlled by them, but it seems unlikely. I can't really explain that article, but it seems very unlikely. Yeah. I mean, he might have planted it. Who knows? But then you want to know. he might have known this discontent. I don't. We're speculating now. Yeah,
like it's a time machine.
We're really speculating now. So the rebels, like I say, they don't want conflict. Trotsky he's not having it though. I think he was in Siberia. He gets back and he basically just demands unconditional surrender, no negotiations. He takes their families hostage in Petrograd as a kind of as a threat, basically. And it's, even if they don't realize it at this point, it's armed conflict is almost inevitable, basically. The ships are the bay is frozen, so the ships are stuck. They can't use their warships really, and the Bolsheviks realize that they need to act quick because if the bay thaws, which was going to happen, they can't get there. It's going to be water. Right now, they can go across the ice. Going across the ice it sounds a lot easier than it is though, because this is a fortification. This is one of the most heavily kind of armed fortifications in Russia. Cannons, machine guns, you name it, they've got it, hundreds. And you've got to walk across open ice with no cover at all to get there. You can see what happens. So basically, they have a problem sending actual troops, because they'll just defect to the Kronstadt, and that does happen. So they're using largely cadets and Cheka agents to go. On March 7th, they began pounding them with artillery, and over the next 10 days, the assault is taking place. So the first assault it sounds like a scene from a film or something. Like it's actually terrifying, like when you picture it in your head. So they're marching across the ice. They've got the cadets at the front. Behind them, they've got
cadets are young military.
Yes, like new recruits, basically. Yeah, and I mean, a cadet is not even a real soldier, are they at that point?
No.
Followed by a select Red Army units.
Yeah.
And then at the back, they have the Cheka, and the Cheka have got machine guns, but they haven't got machine guns for the Kronstadt sailors. They've got machine guns in case the cadets turn around and try and run away.
Yeah, a tactic, of course, that they use very much at like Stalingrad, for instance.
Yeah, so anyone who tries to turn and run gets gunned down by the Cheka.
Yeah.
And the ice now, and the Kronstadt sailors are bombarding them. Obviously, heavy guns. So the ice is breaking. They're getting hit with the bombardment, but also the ice is breaking. So they're falling under the ice and drowning. Obviously, it's Russia in the winter. It's foggy. It sounds absolutely terrifying and horrific. And the thing I do want to remind people, and I do this quite often, is these aren't the bad guys. Like the cadets, do you know what I mean? Like, this isn't. I said it's like a film, but this isn't a film. Like they're not some evil villains who are coming over to, do you know what I mean? Oppress the people. They're just cadets. They think they're doing the right thing. It's following the revolution. The Bolsheviks have taken power. These people are. They think they're doing right. They think they're protecting the revolution. And they're just. It's just a horrific scene.
Was it voluntary to be a cadet, or was there conscription at the time?
That I don't know. Do you know that, Alexei? Did they have conscription?
I don't know.
I actually don't know that.
I thought they'd have conscription.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? Yeah. I mean, very few authoritarian regimes don't have conscription.
Yeah.
I wonder if maybe these cadets are ones that volunteer though, because they obviously
possibly
it's a job that portions of the army won't do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a disaster for them. Obviously, this does not work. Marching across the ice and getting bombarded does not work. So they carry on bombarding the island, but it's got little effect because this is a fortification designed to withstand bombardment and attack. I should mention, I think I forgot to mention, but the island is built, it's a built fortification, like huge walls around. Like it's not just a kind of empty island. Like they've got this military fortification that they're operating from. Skip ahead a few days, and March 16th, 50,000 troops attack the island. There's 15,000 rebels, give or take. They attack at night from 3 directions, and it's foggy, so it's hard to see. They pick up a couple or one unit in the fog lights who are trying to cut barbed wire fences, and they start gunning them down. But most of them they can't see, so they're managing to cross. They're managing to get closer, attacking from three directions. Then dawn arrives, and the fog lifts, and you've just got all these units just stood there, basically in full visibility now. And there's obviously many casualties at that point. They keep pushing though. By afternoon, they've taken several forts, and by midnight, it's basically over. The Bolsheviks have taken. They've taken the fort. The estimates are really hard to be reliable with this. So, take these with a bit of a pinch of salt, but I think they're in the right ballpark. So 10,000 Red Army dead, 600 rebels. So that shows you, like, attacking a fort. Attacking a fort is it's not a good idea if you can avoid it. Always, and that's the case through all of history. If someone's there's certain times when you shouldn't attack people. If they're in the mountains, just leave them. Like, no, I don't think anyone's ever defeated a guerrilla army that's in the mountains. Even
in the jungle.
Yeah, in the jungle. If they're on top of a hill, even, like even just a normal hill is probably not a good idea. And a heavily constructed fort with hundreds of cannons, definitely not a great thing to attack. About 8,000 of them flee to Finland, including Petroshenko. He's repatriated to Russia. Who's the leader, Petroshenko, if you don't remember. He's repatriated to Russia in World War II.
Of the sailors.
Yeah. They say that they won't do anything, but they send him to a prison camp, and he dies there. The other note on this, and this is where I say Trotsky kind of shows his ass a bit, he had authorized the use of poison gas before this. So this actually could have been a lot worse, because Trotsky was ready to basically bombard them with poison gas if this assault didn't work. And I think that, for me, like, just personally, that's kind of chemical weapons are kind of inexcusable anyway. But using chemical weapons on people who were your allies and people who were some of your most important allies, I kind of do think that, I don't want to annoy Trotskyists, but I do think that kind of
Socialist Workers' Party will be round your
that does kind of tell you something about the mentality of a person. Do you know what I mean? That they would be willing to do that is quite disturbing, to be honest. I mean, it's disturbing in your enemies.
There is. One of the again, because I'm eager to learn lessons for the coming revolution. That I think that one of the reasons that. One of the things I think that it occurs to me that we have to fight against is this idea that there is one solution. I think that the reason that leftists can be factional is perhaps because if we look at them, either they're murderous psychopaths, or if you say that what Trotsky believed was that the most important thing was the victory of Marxism, Leninism, that was the only hope for mankind, and therefore the use of poison gas is permissible. Really, anything is permissible because the cause is so much greater. And I think that's a mode of thinking that we really have to free ourselves from. There is not one solution. There is not one answer. I think there's a multiplicity of answers, and the freedom of the individuals is, what are we doing this for? If we end up, gassing, to look kindly on Trotsky's thinking that it was the victory of the revolution and the ultimate liberation of the working class was worth use of poison gas. Of course, it isn't. I believe it isn't. It's not. It's not, because the revolution has been lost at that point. Really. Yeah,
that's a great point. And also, once you're willing to do that, you also risk back engineering a reason that isn't even justified. Like you're willing to do it. It's like, well, you can always find a justification. And this isn't exactly on the surface, the sailors are more ideologically kind of pure than Trotsky is. I understand their reasoning of this will lead to, and I think some historians afterwards have said that not that they'd be justified in using poison gas, but that if it was a successful rebellion, it would have opened up, the possibility of kind of counter-revolutionaries, whether it's Western powers, whether it's the White Army, kind of using Kronstadt as because strategically is so important. It basically almost gives you Petrograd. Yeah, if you control it.
Exactly, and that's I have no answer to that but that is the essential contradiction, isn't it? That into what you just said there. Really, I don't have an answer for it. But
but it is easy to sit and say, "Oh, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this." But I think also we have kind of, most of us, like depending on where you're from, I guess, but in England for sure, we've lived in such like relative stability. It's almost impossible to go into the mentality of someone who's lived through a revolution.
Yes, I think that's true. Yeah. Well, I saw Peter Hitchens talking to Aaron Bastani on Novara, and he was just talking. I mean, not just because particularly, us, because we live on this island, which we somehow think is our doing, but it does keep us protected, has kept us protected for, since
and it's
1066 really. And so we have a particular view. We find it hard to imagine, to live on a continent where, rapacious armies constantly battle backwards and forwards, where you are, somewhere like Poland or the Ukraine is either part is Poland or it's the Austro-Hungarian Empire, I don't know, or, Genghis Khan, I don't know, the Tartar, the Mongols come hurtling through and it's
Well, we had our period of that with the Vikings and the Normans and all that, didn't we?
Yeah, but not since then.
And it's not even just violent stuff. It's, even something like the Black Death.
Yeah.
Where like half the population just dies over like 4 years.
Yeah.
Like that's, we can't even, we've lived through COVID, but that's not really comparable to like 50% of people just gone, overnight. Like, and I genuinely don't, like, we get it in theory. I really don't think people can. Yeah. I don't think you can understand the feeling. Yeah, it's too.
A few years ago,
by the end of this year, right, Alexi?
What's that?
We'll know what it's like to live through a revolution.
Oh yeah, through a revolution.
Yes, you will rue anybody you will rue my words.
Yeah. So there's an area of anthropology called phenomenology. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No.
It's phenomenology. Yeah, it's a bit of a tongue twister. PHENOM. I had to think about it.
I'm so glad we've got an episode title now. Thank you.
Phenomenology. And it's kind of like, it's a good thing at its core. It's about, not just kind of imposing your worldview onto everything and trying to understand those people's lived experience. But there's an aspect of it where they'll be like you walk through the landscape and try and feel it as a kind of prehistoric, person would have felt it.
Right.
And it just reminded me of that, because I'm like, that it's impossible. You can't do that. You don't have the existential dread of not knowing where your next meal's coming from.
No.
Or the fact that you might get killed by something around that corner. And I think that's an extreme example of prehistory, if you like. But I think that's the case with just any time in history.
Me and Linda, we had one of those cruises, that they advertised during Midsummer Murders, and we went up the Rhine, and a professor, and
they ran out of fish cakes, and we didn't.
You can't believe our suffering. But a professor came on, and because we were traveling through that landscape, talked about the 100 Years' War, and you just thought, how did people fucking, you'd be like, what is it now?
Yeah.
The depredations of war that ravaged that. I mean, it didn't, it wasn't that, even once the 100 Years' War had ended, it wasn't that good. But I mean, just to live in that kind of conflict for a century.
Mm-hmm.
Dude,
even just being bombarded with the images from Gaza on my phone, you see it every day, but I still can't imagine what it must fucking feel like
for 100 years, which it may do, but
You should try though. You should try and imagine.
Yeah.
Specific.
Yeah. You think, shall I buy like that hat? And you think, oh, fuck no. The papist forces will come through tomorrow and steal it anyway.
Yeah.
Along with me pig.
Even if you think in London, up until a couple hundred years ago, they're like hang drawing and quartering people in the street, and there's people watching it for entertainment, and you can't relate to that.
Now you have to go and see Jack Whitehall. Yeah. That kind of horror.
Get hung, drawn, and quartered. If you could hang, draw, and quarter one comedian, who would it be?
No, I just mean that level of revulsion.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But it's I think that's something that we should be just conscious of like, you can't relate, like you really can't, and be aware of that it's probably more horrific than you even imagine in your head, whether it's history or whether it is, Gaza now.
Yeah.
It's however bad you think it is, it's probably actually worse to actually live through it.
Fuck, that's, So, I mean, to return to the aftermath.
So the aftermath. So it's kind of widely assumed that the rebellion inspires Lenin to announce the new economic policy. Mm-hmm. That's a very kind of idealistic view. It's not. It's almost certainly not. That's in the works, regardless. So they were planning to end war communism. Anyway, so that's the one demand that actually does get met, kind of coincidentally, almost. Yeah. None of the others get met. Obviously, they if anything, they go the other way. They get more, which. I mean, it's not causation, but failed rebellions often do lead to it going more to the opposite of what you wanted. Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, we have to look at like the Arab Spring for that. Yeah. I mean, in some ways.
Yeah.
Famines and peasant uprisings and so on continued through certainly the 1920s. Yeah. But there is no. I mean, not that I suppose in a way Kronstadt was never a real serious challenge to Bolshevik power, but there is not another challenge.
There's just from a historical perspective. I don't know how people who are more kind of political philosophy look at it from a historical perspective. I think it kind of signifies a shift to me where the Bolsheviks go from their greatest fear is external forces and the remnants of the Tsarist Russia to actually internal forces, many of whom are roughly in the same ballpark as they are.
Yes.
That's the
and
big...
Of course, that's what, my research, all those, the architects of the suppression of Kronstadt, like Tukhachevsky and stuff, of course, they are all done away with in the pages of the 30s.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So, I mean, Trotsky himself is
early on, early doors.
Zinoviev is he's in charge of Petrograd, and he's obviously killed in the Great Purge. So these people who implemented this authoritarianism, they suffered from it in the end themselves, which obviously has an irony to it. It's seen as a fork in the road, I guess, between libertarian socialism, anarchy and authoritarianism. But I do think that's a bit of a simplification, because I don't think it was ever going to succeed, really. I think the power balance is too different, and the Bolsheviks were never going to agree to the demands. So I think, and this is just my opinion, obviously, but I think that's a bit of a kind of, idea. And people like these dichotomies in history. They like this.
Yes,
they like this kind of like one or the other. Oh, if only this would have happened. It's impossible.
Right, yeah.
We have too many examples through history where there's random things have a massive impact, and to prove that you can't really predict if this would have happened, this would have happened. It just doesn't work like that. Whether it's the Great Fire of London, burning down all of London and just changing the whole kind of makeup of England and therefore the world later on. Whether it's the kind of, like you say, the Mongol invasions, just kind of decimating China and the Middle East, destroying all the libraries in Iraq and that kind of thing. There's there's too many of these kind of almost like I don't know what you call it. Do they call it like a black swan? Is that what people call it? Where it's like there's too much randomness is the basically is the thing to say, oh, if this would have happened, then, you know, Russia would have been this kind of utopia where actually it all worked out and stuff. There's too many factors to kind of to say that. Yeah. But it is.
Yeah. If Jeremy Corbyn became prime minister, we would be all holding hands and living.
Well, that's true. It would have been. Well, thank you very much, Khaled, for that. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
It's been brilliant. Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned there from the. Yeah,
and it was really interesting for me as well, because obviously I'm, you know, interested in the history, and it was really interesting for me to talk with someone who has a better grasp of the kind of political philosophy behind it. No, honestly, it was great, because I am a socialist, but I don't have a deep understanding of the of the factions and all that kind of stuff. So that was.
Well, I didn't realize. Yeah, I didn't realize I did until I started talking about it. But I've sadly been living this shit for 71 years. You know, this factional. You know, it's in my muscle memory, really, almost.
Yeah.
You know, the nuance of. The Marxist struggle. I wish I knew about, you know, flowers.
And do you promise that once you launch your revolution, you're not going to become authoritarian?
No, I promise. Yeah, I'm not. I promise that I'm not going to be authoritarian. That this is going to be a revolution for all, and then of course those promises will be betrayed within about 8 months.
Yeah, when the agents of the EU tried to make people in Cumbria counter-revolutionaries.
Yeah, that I will unfortunately.
I'm gonna have to bomb the Lake District.
Oh no! Yeah.
The people's the Comintern, which will be me, Wilf Mabanga, the cat, Linda Sale, Steve from Kung Fu. That'll be we'll unfortunately that we won't want to, you know, take these have these repressive measures, but our hand will have been forced.
What will happen to me?
Hey,
am I on the squad?
It depends. I don't know. You're a bit. I don't know. You might be Trotsky.
You might get the ice pick.
Yeah, you might be the close.
Hey, I'm the Woodcrafter. I'm from the Woodcraft folk.
Yeah,
I'll be maintaining the peace big time. I'm telling you to put the guns down.
Exactly. You're
just make sure you're not starving.
Your words will become counter-revolutionary.
That's true.
Yeah,
I won't be strong enough.
Or maybe you'll be like the. Yeah, like Henry V and Falstaff. You'll be the foolish figure who I have to slew off because I've become serious about shit. Who knows?
The sacrifice.
You're not very Falstaffian, but still. Yeah. Thank you, comrades. Thank you very much. It's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Adelante los radicales. Forward the radicals. Yeah, well, that was amazing. Actually, I must say, sometimes I go, if you really want to insult me, leave a message in the YouTube comments, because that's the only ones I look at. I sometimes
don't say that.
Find myself looking at comments.
Yeah,
but I just go back. Sometimes they come up on my feed. Old podcasts of mine. I just say, bloody hell, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's all the podcasts we've done over the years, and they're just full of fucking interesting people and,
agreed,
interesting
man.
ideas and stuff, yeah, which I'm sure isn't the case of, and the rest is politics with shit-faced Alistair Campbell and monkey-faced George Stewart.
Well, although we do get topical, I think we don't get too deep on the topical nature of stuff, so that our podcasts, you can re-listen to them and still find value in it. And and then sometimes we just do stuff that isn't topical but very interesting. Like I was thinking the other day about that episode we did about Jesus' love never failed me yet. Remember that episode?
Gammon Byers,
And and you're talking about repetition, and I thought that was such a clever episode and really well put together. And you kind of semi-scripted it. And if the listeners at home like those ones where it's just Alexi and myself, digging down on a very specific topic or concept, then let us know. Email us alexeisaylepodcast@gmail.com. or on our Patreon, or in the YouTube comments, as Alexi just mentioned.
We haven't done one just us for a while. Maybe the next one we should do that. Really,
that would be nice. Yeah,
people do.
I've missed you.
I've missed you. Well, I see you all the fucking time, but in a podcasty way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big protest this weekend. You spoke at one of the recent protests.
The last one, I think. Yeah.
Not trying to give you clout for doing something that's just what you should be doing, but no, it's very nice to see, and you're always regularly at the protest, so we encourage all the listeners at home, take part in local action, go to the big protests, boycott shit.
Oh, absolutely. It was funny, when you're speaking, you march at the head carrying the banner, and I'm never like that, because they walk really fast, and then also when people try and get to the front and sort of barge, I only lasted at the head of it for about 5 minutes.
And then what? Your helicopter comes, picks you up, takes you to the front.
I just went to the side and stood there for a bit, really. And I actually do prefer just to march, not even sometimes in the Jewish bloc, but sometimes just with my mate Steve, who I always go with.
Well, how then do you get to the speaker's podium if you've not?
Oh well, you just go around the back. I know how to get into a into a VIP area. I just, say, they were texting me last time saying, "Where are you?" Because I was just
lagging behind
the march somewhere, but I got there in time, really. And I didn't actually speak for my full allocated 3 minutes, but I prefer. Making speeches, as I've probably discussed before, is an odd thing and not something that actually fits very well with my makeup, because you've got a very diverse crowd, from Muslim granddads, grandmothers to young, very sincere religious Jewish people, and it's a bit of a broad.
But I wouldn't call that, and that makes sense, because what you're doing up there, on the times you've been invited up there, isn't a speech like we've seen Hassam Zumlot do, or Corbyn, or whoever.
Exactly.
You do something from the heart, or you recite a poem that speaks to you.
Yeah.
You do it in your own way, because you're a creative, you're an artist, you're not a politician, you're not So
but it's a challenge in a way. So I don't, if anybody's just interested in the methodology of it, I usually have a poem or something that I can do, but apart from that, while I'm on the march, I just think about what I'm going to say, really, and then I have no notes or anything, but just say it. So I say, speak from the heart when I'm up there, really, which is in a way
that's you using your strengths, because a lot of people can't do that. A lot of people need that piece of paper and read from it, and you can still see their hand shaking while they're standing there reading it. Whereas you actually just dive deep into yourself and think, okay, this is what I want to say, and you get up and you say it, and that's the strength of a comedic performer.
It's not what it's sometimes I feel like it's not what people are expecting from the stage, really, because they got so habituated to a certain type of speech, it gives them a bit of a slight jolt, really, but which is within reason, which is fine.
And you're the only one. It was a few years ago. It wasn't during this conflict, for want of a better word, but this genocide. But a few years ago, you got up and you called Keir Starmer a shitbag. Yeah. And then you said, here's Jeremy Corbyn instead. And you introduced
again, that was just like improvised on the spot. I just said, what did I say?
No one else going to do that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. I said, where is the little shitbag? He's not here.
Yeah.
He's the only, the real
leader of the opposition.
The real leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn.
Classic moment.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It is a minor contribution to the ideological struggle. I'm glad to have made it. Sometimes Yeah.
Look, before you say Night City, thank Khaled Winter once again for coming on.
Yes, he's great.
His podcast is Comedians Talking History. I'm only repeatedly and passionately plugging it because I love his show and I love what he does. And please support the show by going to patreon.com/alexeisaylepodcast. Yeah, that was a great one. It was a long one today as well.
But people don't mind that, do they?
No, we love long.
With that. All right. Bye. You've been listening to the Alexeisay podcast. This show is produced and edited by Talal Karkuti. Music by Tarbush Records. Thanks to Audio Boom for hosting us. Please keep your emails coming in at alexeisaylepodcast@gmail.com. Goodbye.